Well, good evening YouTube. This is Warbles on a lot, sitting on the veranda in the moonlight with the 240 volt high efficiency light bulb running on pyramid power stored electricity. And this is a response video to AdamShumpisxXx, who's just made and posted a lovely little 21.5-minute clip called "Violence Always Wrong?" which was his response to my couple of months ago video called "It is better to be selfless," in which, as I have said in many forums, many places, it is better to be selfless, and it's better to be non-resistant. And I've also suggested that violence is the last refuge of the incompetent, and that's not original. It's something that Isaac Asimov wrote in the mouth of a character called Salvor Hardin in a novel called Foundation. It was the first of the Foundation trilogy, which ran to 6 books. But yeah, the idea is that when everything else fails, you throw a temper tantrum. And the temper tantrum is generally motivated by fear as much as anger. And I think it was Socrates who said, "It is better to suffer evil than it is to commit evil." Alright, and well, it's difficult for anybody who has zero belief in cosmic scoreboard effect or any kind of a God theory to accept these premises. If you honestly believe that you have to keep looking over your shoulder 24 hours a day to keep yourself safe by eternal vigilance, well, the price is paranoia, like howling, psychotic paranoia. You're never ever going to be able to hide a cubic foot of vital meat behind the hole in the barrel that the projectile comes out of. And yeah, your little super short shotgun looks like an interesting toy. Even though I'm a pacifist and a greenie these days, I got my first projectile weapon as a BSA .177 caliber air rifle when I was 6 years old. I was sitting in the backyard to keep the currawongs and the magpies off the washing. I took my grandfather's semi-automatic target rifle to boarding school, and I was captain of the rifle team. I knew you had to be a crack shot to be a fighter pilot, you see, and I set my heart on being the world's best fighter pilot. And it was a phase that I went through. After another phase of driving under the influence and possession of a firearm while under the influence, I lost my shooter's licence for a while. And I then went and got another shooter's licence. I had to make a court appearance to get it. And at its peak, my ballistic phase, I had 9 guns hanging on the wall. And I used to like to buy a gun that was designed for shooting at people and become fairly proficient with that weapon, and then trade it in and get a different one and become good at that. The biggest and best people gun that I used to play with was a Swedish thing called a Ljungman 7.98 caliber 10 round. It was pretty much the Swedish equivalent of the M1 Garand, but it was a much better weapon. It had a muzzle brake. It would return to battery rest, you know, like you could fire 3 rounds as fast as you could pull the trigger, and at 50 yards you'd get a group the size of a hen's egg. So yeah, I've been that whole ballistic fantasy, and from what I know, your plan of sneaking through your own house holding a shotgun, giving warning that you're holding a shotgun by cocking it and going click click, that's going to cause anybody who is disrespectful enough of you to want to break into your house to steal your property to have, if they've got any understanding of your mentality, they're going to know that you're armed. They're going to therefore be armed themselves when they break into your house, and as soon as you work the action of your shotgun, by all the training manuals that I've read, the correct manoeuvre is to roll and dive and fire half a clip in the direction of the click-clack noise. Right? That's what I think you can expect from any serious armed home invader. As soon as you make them aware that you're holding armoury, you know, like ballistic weapons, they're just going to shoot back at you. Right? Now, I'm going to talk about a particular case. It's a family case. I'm talking about my second cousin's son. He was a police officer. His father was a police officer twice. His stepbrother is a police officer. And this young fella was 26 when we buried him a year and maybe 3 months ago. I think it was September in 2010. And he'd been in the police force for a couple of years, and he was on the fast track to promotion. He had a university degree. Because I'm obviously a hillbilly and his father was a police officer, we never had anything to do with each other when he was a little kid. We shared a 3-kilometre boundary fence for 5 years, and I never actually spoke to this kid because I didn't want to compromise his father's position by having too much to do with an obvious disestablishmentarian. So I never ever got to give Billy Cruz my rave on firearms and how you can't possibly hide behind a hole in the barrel that the bullet comes out. So young fella, my nephew, who I never had this conversation with, he got transferred to the Middle Eastern Organised Crime Squad in Sydney. And he'd been 2 weeks or 6 weeks with the MEOC, as they call themselves. And they needed to have a simple, safe little search warrant to test out their new wet behind the ears greenhorn detective. Somebody fed information into the police system to the effect that a drug dealer was at a particular house. The MEOC boys showed up, jumped out of their cars at 9 o'clock or so at night, ran across the grass towards the house. As they were running towards the house, these Middle Eastern looking blokes, big muscle builders, dark, swarthy, were drawing their police Glocks out of the back of their belts. None of them were in police uniform, none of them were wearing body armour, none of them had any way of identifying that they were police. These are undercover detectives. Now that's part one of the story. Part two of the story is that somebody who lived in that house had borrowed a handgun from somebody else, and they'd used that handgun to rob an amphetamines dealer. Now, how does an amphetamine dealer get even with an armed robber? There's a telephone number called Crime Stoppers. I imagine it would have taken 3 to 5 anonymous phone calls, making 3 to 5 anonymous wrong complaints about drug dealing going on at that house. And I did hear a news report from the coroner's inquest a couple of weeks ago, and the detective who swore out the warrant was twice told by his informant that there were no firearms at the house, which is why the police were not wearing any bulletproof gear and no identification. The individual who'd done the drug robbery saw these burly looking blokes coming across his lawn pulling firearms out of their belts. He thought it was a return match home invasion, and he went and he hid in the garage. Young Billy went into the garage trying to hide behind his Glock with it sticking out in front of him. The person had a Vietnamese name and he's of an age to have perhaps had military training, and he fired one shot which hit Billy in the left arm. Billy responded with all of his training, and he got off 2 shots, might have been 3 shots. However, somebody was on the other side of a doorway, perhaps the personal access doorway from the garage to the rest of the house, and as far as they were concerned, the first shot alerted them. The next 2 shots were fired in their direction, and you can tell when a gunshot's fired towards yourself. So the experienced 20-year service police detective who had sworn out the warrant for the raid to take the young detective on, he fired in the direction of the muzzle flash. This is night time, remember. All your training tells you to fire at the muzzle flash. And young Billy Cruz took that police Glock bullet in his police neck. And he died that night. Right? He did everything according to the training. He was on the side of righteousness. He thought he was doing a search warrant on a drug dealer. But the actual drug dealer had set the police up as a return match home invasion against a criminal with a gun. So that's just one little personal example of what happens when you go gunfighting at night with a unknown assailant who may or may not be armed. Right? You can come unglued. Happened to a relative of mine. The fact is, you'll spend an enormous amount of time fantasising about what you would do if somebody were to commit this, that or the other violent act upon yourself. And if they never do it, it's a waste of your lifetime to worry about it. Have you ever tried to construct a weapon? Have you ever built a knife? You know, it takes days, even if you've got a pretty good workshop and you know what you're doing, and you've got the raw materials. If you have to go and dig up the iron ore and dig up the coal and smelt the metal, it can take you months to make a knife, if you know what you're doing. To make a crossbow, if you've got a workshop and you know what you're doing and you've got a plan, it's going to take you a month or so. How much of your life are you going to invest in defending yourself against your own violent, paranoid fantasies? It isn't worth it. My method is to accept that I was born, I'm going to die, and I expect the Creator to keep me safe. That's, you know, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. And I shall fear no evil because I expect, if anybody wants to shoot me in my headlights while I'm opening the gate, because the Creator of the universe knows I'm a harmless pacifist vegetarian and I might be going to do a few good things yet, they'll crash their car on the way, or they'll shoot themselves in the foot, or some other thing will happen. You know, like maybe they'll park beside a New England funnel web. I have them running around. There's one that lives at my front gate. I mean, the wildlife thinks I'm harmless. Wild birds attack wild snakes to keep me safe. I trust the cosmic scoreboard effect, the Creator of the universe. It relieves me of the burden of having to keep myself safe. I just burble along, you know, being a mad scientist. Basically, go to my playlist called Warbles in the Wilderness and have a look at the God Theory trilogy. I'm pretty sure it's in Applied God Theory, the third one in the triptych. Don't plan to fight or to defend. Don't dream yourself a bloody end. And my phone's just about out of memory, so even though I could upload longer, I'm going to have to call a halt to this. But yeah, thanks very much for the video, and isn't it funny that Gary and I agree on something? Death is too strong a penalty for home invasion. So, thanks again.